this is what I will try to cover over the next hopefully 20-25 minutes. Several of these points have been already discussed or touched on, so hopefully I will just glide through those just briefly. And again, this is probably one of those that has been already touched on. International trade. How does this happen? It's really a core piece from what we get through WTO. They through their member countries gather together some concerns and agreements, and then they put out some general guidelines. However, as we can imagine, most of these policies are discussed by, I don't know, marketers, politicians, maybe lawyers, but not a lot of them may be, I don't know, from the biological field. Certainly veterinarians and animals do get sick. So this requires a little bit of additional thought put into all these international guidelines, and that's where OIE comes into play. Somebody already mentioned OIE has 180 members, and if this is something I Googled recently, there are 196 recognized countries in the world. So having 180 of those as members says a lot. And so one of the objectives of OIE setting these guidelines is towards promoting safe trade of live animals and animal products. And one of the things that OIE looks into is what is the disease status for the national flock, in this case for the countries that are trying to engage into trade. And that's perhaps one of the main things, but they certainly look at what are the veterinary services capabilities for those trading partners. Now, when it comes to the real thing, when it comes to actually having those trades, each country does put forth their own set of requirements, and they always use OIE's guidelines in their set of requirements. However, those guidelines are usually used to their advantage or to their convenience. They say we need the flocks of origin or farms of origin or countries of origin free of avian influenza as defined by OIE, right? So they want to follow that definition of OIE for what's avian influenza. But they go back and say we want 12 months of freedom of this disease, or 24 months freedom of this disease. OIE does not say anything about that. There's certain guidelines, and I'm sure you all have heard about the 90-day time frame usually considered by OIE as the time frame required to consider an area or a country free of any particular disease. And so every country will have its own set of requirements, whether they use OIE's guidelines or not as such as a guideline. And the US is the example I have over here. For USDA, Newcastle disease status of a given country to be considered as a potential source of poultry will have a high bar to determine whether those imports may or may not be permitted. And from that, it is how USDA determines, again, what kind of additional requirements may be included on that list. This slide is just to highlight and emphasize how important poultry is for us. It is considered that it is the most abundant species on planet Earth. At any given time, there is approximately 7 billion chickens today. If we look around, there will be that number, for a total of a little over 52 billion chickens killed for food in any given year. It is in terms of number of animals killed for food in any on an annual basis, it is the species that is by far the largest, and that is compared to any of the other species in there. The silhouette you see in there represents the number of animals for that species killed for food on an annual basis. And so, as you can see, the chicken is by far larger than pigs and certainly cattle. So poultry is highly has been highly internationalized, if that is a word. As you can see here, this map represents how poultry products move around the world and which countries may be more active in the international market. This graph over here shows those most actively exporting countries. The U.S. and Brazil have been fighting over who ranks number one for quite some time. But we have also some of the countries. Thailand is one that appears there that I believe I have later as one of my examples for the issues we face in exporting live baby chicks. So for trade of live poultry, avian influenza is by far one of the most, or perhaps even the most important diseases, because of the disruption in the markets that it can cause. Thailand, as the example I have here, they suffered a high-path outbreak back in 2004, and as soon as the news came out to the world, they experienced an immediate, it was overnight, drop in their exports, as well as in the consumption of poultry products domestically. And it took them about 2 years to recover the same levels they had of production and exports from prior to that outbreak. Back in 2014 and 15, the outbreak we experienced here in the United States, we had approximately 40 countries that different degrees imposed certain levels of restrictions to imports from the country, whether this was a complete ban countrywide, such as China, Thailand, South Korea, or to a state level, multiple countries imposed sanctions at a state level, or some that were a lot more friendly, that imposed sanctions only at a county or even control zone levels, such as Canada, Mexico, the EU. Those were very friendly with us back then. We all saw these kind of graphs before, back in those days. Stacy touched on these before, and that was kind of the main thing, the summary of what happened. Back then, almost 50 million animals killed either by the disease or by depopulation efforts, and certainly all sectors of the industry were affected. One point I want to make here is back in those days, layers and turkeys were directly affected by the disease. Those were the sectors that experienced disease. The broiler sector was not directly affected by the disease, and yet it also experienced very severe impact by this disease. And somehow, as consumers, we also noticed perhaps somehow of an opposite effect. For layers and turkeys, we saw prices of these products go up pretty quick. I remember eggs doubled and tripled their cost at a consumer level just within weeks when this outbreak was getting out of hand, and the impact on that population was being noticed. In the case of broilers, though, the impact was totally opposite, and it is explained by two causes or two reasons. One was obviously, since that sector was not impacted directly by the disease, the production from this sector remained unchanged, and then due to the sanctions imposed by trading partners, there was quite a bit of products that could no longer go out to those regular destinations, and had therefore to remain within the country. That caused an overflow of broiler meat in the country, and then, if you noticed, we had a decrease in the price we as consumers pay at the supermarket. For the poultry industry in general, as far as exports, looking at everything in general, had been going up on previous years, and then we saw a sudden drop. It was estimated to be about between 15 and 20% drop in exports for the otherwise regular export volumes for meat. However, value-wise, it was estimated to be approximately 25% that the industry did not get or lost. So it was somewhat of a chicken hell here for the industry. Back in those days, estimated to be a little over $4 billion total losses during that outbreak. And then I'm going to shift gears now and start talking a little bit about the primary breeders, what we do and who we are. But in a few words, the primary breeders do the genetic selection and genetic progress. As you can see, these chickens over here, regardless of where the chicken came from, you see in here from back in the 50s, even 40s in reality, is where the primary breeders started working on developing this chicken. And as you can see, the chicken under the 2005 as the modern chicken, we can attribute all these, or in a good part of these, to the genetic improvement that the primary breeders have achieved over these past 4 or 5 decades. Certainly, technology has also a lot to do to allowing that chicken to express its genetic potential. But that is in essence what the primary breeders do. They do genetic selection to improve the characteristics of these chickens. And I refer a lot to the meat side of the industry, but it is something similar to the other sectors of the industry. For a laying hen, for example, a primary breeder will obviously focus its efforts on developing a chicken that will lay some more eggs, and always considering the efficiency aspect of it in terms of how much feed that chicken will eat, among many other traits. Now, the relevance for our sectors is considered very high. As we saw before, any given year there will be a little over 50 billion chickens killed for food on planet Earth. Most of these comes out of a little over 400 million breeders, right? The mothers of that broiler chicken, on a worldwide basis, again, there will be approximately 400 of these breeders required to produce that mass amount of chickens. And most of these, a little over 90% of these breeders will come out of 3 genetic companies. Those are noted in there: Avigen, Cobb, and Hubbard. Dr. Hatcher knows these. The 3 of us, those 3 companies, have operations in Tennessee. That's something very unique about Tennessee. So 90%, maybe a little over, of those genetics come out of just three companies, and according to our own estimates, between 45 and 60% of those genetics originate from the U.S. Okay. And so that is just to highlight the importance of these genetics for the poultry industry in the world. And the reason for that very broad range, 45 to 60%, is because of avian influenza, particularly back in 2015 or prior to that big outbreak. Our estimates pointed towards 60% of the broiler genetics globally would come from the United States. After punching some additional numbers and all the exports that we were doing last year, my numbers went considerably down to somewhere between 45 and 50%. So there you have it. Roughly speaking, we could say that at least 20% of that, 10% was lost to this outbreak in 2015. So we need alternatives to trade and safe trade. It's not just moving animals for the sake of moving those animals because there is a need to vacate premises to get the new flock or things like that. It has to be done under safe conditions. And what are these alternatives? Well, it is by looking at the subpopulations of animals, and these subpopulations are really what define what OIE has put forth for quite a few years already as these 2 concepts. And we touched on these on Rosemary's presentation early on, the regionalization and compartmentalization concepts. So how do these concepts work? For regionalization, we need to think in terms of geography, in terms of distances. In that way, we can, if we can explain and demonstrate that these subpopulations of animals are maintained on their different set of epidemiological situations, then those that are not within areas affected by a disease should be allowed to move product. It's kind of intuitive concept, and that is what USDA has been working really hard at getting trading partners to accept, and that way to allow for a continuation of trade. I want to give you this example, and this is perhaps what caused or prompted Lucas to invite me to speak here today. South Korea, again, this is taking the example back in 2015. South Korea imposed a countrywide ban over imports of poultry pretty much very soon, very early on during this outbreak. If you remember, the first commercial flock that was affected by avian influenza back in 2015 was in the state of California. And yet there were also 3 or 4 high-path cases that had been reported before, some of them even in wild bird falcons and backyards, all in the northwest. And yet again, South Korea, as the example, banned in the entire United States. That is a map showing where that affected premises, commercial premises, it was turkeys, if I remember correctly, was located. And I also noted here the closest of the premises for my company, which is not necessarily too far off from some of my competitors as well. We are not located in anywhere near the West Coast, any of us. And so what I did was just to go to Google, pull up a map, and without changing any of the views in there, I cut and pasted these pieces of the map and overimposed the map of South Korea on this map of this region of the United States. And so we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times the length of South Korea in between the affected premises of turkeys in California and the closest of the Cobb farms, that one being in East Oklahoma. And so, hey, is that fair? I don't think so. And so that is where regionalization should really work. It's just focus on where the issue is and then allow the rest to continue business as usual. For compartmentalization, things work a little different. We are still looking at subpopulation of animals. However, we're not necessarily considering distances in here. What we're doing is to concentrate on a program, a set of practices conducive to allowing that subpopulation to remain free of a particular disease. And compartmentalization for the poultry industry was pretty much thought of towards keeping avian influenza and Newcastle disease out of poultry premises. So it is a management program, right? Rather than a geographical or distance-based concept, based on biosecurity. Back to the exercise, or well, the outbreak of 2015. That is how the map of the United States looked like right towards the very end of this outbreak. And in similar fashion, I'm illustrating here the closest of our farms, just a little over the state line between Arkansas and Missouri. And we're still talking to any of those counties in here, whether it is in in Missouri or Arkansas. We were still somewhere close to or around 100 miles away from any of those affected premises up there. And that is that really where compartmentalization should apply? It depends. In my view, it is getting close, but it doesn't necessarily has to. And yet, given all the set of reactions that we may get from different countries, it's certainly something that I would consider a valid move to pull out the compartmentalization card. Now, another example, and this is for what's happening these days. We get an email from a customer in Sri Lanka, and this customer says, discussing an order coming up. This is grandparent stock. I don't know if you're familiar with all the terminology for the breeding stock, but just in brief, the broiler chickens come from the parents, and then the parents come from a generation above that we refer as the grandparents or GPs. That's what this is, an order for GPs. And so the customer says, we're getting ready for this upcoming order of GPs for us, and in consulting with the authorities with regards to the situation of avian influenza in the state of Tennessee, our authorities have indicated that they will allow the importation of our GPs as long as the sources of those eggs that will produce the GPs are not from Tennessee, but they do not neighbor the Tennessee state either. And well, guess what? Those are my locations. So all the Cobb logos you see there, those indicate hatcheries. We have hatcheries in those states. Wherever we have hatcheries, we also have farms. And then the other symbols you see here also indicate, well, the stars, to start with, these two stars, also indicate location of hatchery, and as well as farms. We just don't use those two particular hatcheries too often for international shipments. And then the other ones are also states where we have farms, not necessarily hatchery. I'm getting close to finishing. So that leaves me only, if you noticed, all the states that touch Tennessee, that leaves me only with Texas and Oklahoma as my possible sources for shipments to Sri Lanka. That cost me a lot. It cuts me down to about 20% or so of my possible sources otherwise. Really, really hard. Last example, Brazil. Brazil is very strict. They only import upper pipeline of genetics. And when we started experiencing these reports in Tennessee, they immediately changed their requirements. They went somewhat ballistic with very stringent testing requirements and some other things, including inspections. And so that's that. Guess what? Karma works sometimes. They got this big scandal on their tainted meat, and they lost quite a bit of market just overnight once those news went online. What was USDA's reaction? The USDA did not impose any sanctions per se, but they went on a higher level of testing mode just to make sure that the product is okay, right? Is safe to get into the food chain. So I'm coming down to some of the last slides. We need to work on the trust basis with our trading partners, and that works only through building relationships. We have to work to promoting these concept of compartmentalization, which is something that we've been working on for quite a few years. There you see representatives from multiple primary breeders and also MPIP, and Dr. Gleason from U.S. Poultry Egg Association. Some countries will be a little more friendly to accept this concept. We believe that starting with those more amicable trading partners, Canada, the EU, might be a good starting step. But some other countries that do represent an important market will also be a little more difficult, but still I think we have a good shot at getting them to accept compartmentalization. There's 3 examples of countries that have already accepted compartments recognized and certified by DEFRA in the UK. Because avian influenza is here to linger. I don't want to say to stay, but it'll linger for quite some time. And since January 2014, for example, it says 77 countries have been affected in different degrees by avian influenza. That's a good chunk of the number of countries on the planet. This is how it looks, the map currently for cases of avian influenza around the globe in over the last 12 months or so. And this is the map for what's going on in the U.S. Currently. So again, we need to consider these trading policies, work in building those relationships, work towards equivalencies and recognizing those. But certainly trust is always going to be a key component in developing these relationships. One more thing is about those equivalencies. There are multiple ways to achieve the same goal, and these are based on the capabilities of each country. The veterinary services structure in the United States is not exactly the same as that down in Brazil, just to put an example out there. And so I always tell in my conversations with folks in the international arena that the fact that things may be done on a regular basis a certain way in other countries does not mean that is the best way. It is perhaps the best way for that kind of circumstances in that country, but they should only tell us what they want. They want avian influenza-free product. Well, that's the goal. Now let me determine what is the best way to provide that avian influenza-free products here through, obviously, the partnership with USDA. And the USDA and the industry here in the United States can speak the same language. And so that's it. Trust is a key component. I just want to emphasize that.